grow the movement for community rights and rights of nature. Now, some of you may not be familiar with what community rights is about, and so that was hopefully gave you an introduction to the community rights message and strategy. I'd also like to thank David Harewood for taking on directing our ragtag team here. So just like Dorothy in Time's Out, many of us find ourselves upset about injustices in our own communities, right? And we read about things taking place in our communities. We read articles and see headlines like 90% of the Great Barrier Reef is being destroyed, 72 million pounds of known carcinogens are released in the atmosphere every year, 2 trillion pounds of livestock waste is laced with antibiotics, hormones, and chemicals and are being dumped into our waterways. Chromium 6 and 8 are found in Ohio waterways, in case you didn't know. There's lead in the water in Flint and Sebring, Ohio, and we know that toxic algae is suffocating Lake Erie. The planet is virtually on the verge of collapse, total ecological collapse. I mean, and we see it every day. It seems depressing, I know. And just like Dorothy, we often spend much of our time and a lot of our energy trying to convince those people who make the laws and enforce the laws to enforce the laws instead, and trying to help the people in the environment. But what we don't realize is that those laws are set up by the people who are profiting from them. The system's there to protect their profits and not people in nature. It creates an illusion of protection. And we, the people, have been led to believe it will work for us in nature. I think the headlines are pretty clear that it's not working. We're living with the dire effects of this delusion. And just like Dorothy, we need to wake up and snap out of it. We need to see reality and work together to change the status quo. We have been lulled into accepting and believing that that's the only way. Well, we're currently witnessing this being played out in real time with the Lake Erie Bill of Rights in Toledo, Ohio, so I thought I would tell you a little bit about that story. In August 2014, Toledo residents woke up to all kinds of warnings, all over the TV, the radio. They were told to not drink the water, not do laundry in the water, don't take a shower in the water. They were basically told, don't touch your water because it will make you sick. This went on for 3 whole days. Businesses closed, employees were sent home with no pay, hospitals turned away patients, except for the most critical, and store shelves were depleted within hours of all bottled water. Think about if you woke up tomorrow morning and you had those warnings. Remember Flint. So the people of Toledo did what Dorothy and the rest of us usually do, and that is they started contacting their electeds. They voiced their anger at the situation and told them they had to fix it. Well, guess what? This August 4th, it's 5 years since that day, and the electeds and state government have done nothing to protect the people of Toledo and Lake Erie, except to promise more of our tax dollars funneled into more studies and more testing, and making the polluters take some voluntary actions. Big deal. Nothing the government has done has actually been aimed at prohibiting the problem in Toledo and to the lake, but just about spending more of our money to appease the people and make it seem like they're addressing the problem. Now, I want all of you to think about an issue you're passionate about. Obviously, you're not on Lake Erie, but you are passionate about some issue, maybe something you've donated time and money to. Does any of this sound familiar to you at all? Well, after 2 years of playing in this fixed game, the Toledo residents approached the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, and it was suggested that maybe they should consider a law put forth by the people and voted on by the people to give Lake Erie rights of its own. It's a living entity. Give the lake the right to thrive, to flourish, to be healthy. Why not? We all know living without a clean lake and healthy Lake Erie, the people can't be healthy either. So like Dorothy, the people decided to do what others would not. Challenge the system and powerful directly. So the people worked on their language just like the group here in Columbus is doing. of what the law they wanted it to say. They circulated petitions to put this on the ballot. They said that any corporation or government that was going to violate and harm the rights of the lake would be in violation of their law, and the people could bring a lawsuit in the name of Lake Erie. After all, we do claim to be a self-governing people, don't we? Well, believe it or not, against all odds, the people did collect enough signatures. They turned them in, and then guess what happened? Some of you know the end of the story. They were kept off the ballot. Does that sound familiar, Columbus activists? Yes. Well, the stars were aligning in Toledo, I guess, that month. So due to other events going on in the city with another initiative regarding the location of a new city jail, and this is an initiative that the electeds were actually in favor of, the electeds found a way to put the jail initiative on the ballot, and it was a special election. So the activists for Lake Erie decided, hey, we need to take advantage of this. So they went to their electeds too and said, hey, you got a special election going, why not put ours on too? And that's exactly what happened. So the Lake Erie Bill of Rights was put on this past February special election. I believe it was February 26th. So they decided, okay, we need to do a campaign now, and it's in February. Not the best time to go out campaigning, and it was a pretty cold winter this past winter. So, you know, these Toledoans realized no one, just like Dorothy, was coming to save them or their drinking water. But they kept doing it, and it was funny because all of a sudden, midway through, they started hearing the beginning of Toledo. Their airways were taken over by opposition ads like you've never heard. I mean, you couldn't go up there and not turn on the radio and not hear an ad. And the things they came up with, they said if the law passed, it would cost everyone in Toledo their jobs. Utility rates would skyrocket, and somehow it would be detrimental to all churches in Toledo. I don't know, we never did figure out that one. I know, we didn't figure that one out either. We don't get the connection. But in spite of being outspent by $300,000, and a little side note, they found out after the election that money came directly from BP North America to a phony citizen PAC that was set up. The people won the election anyway. 61%. They only had $6,000 to spend against the $300,000, and they still won. I have a feeling the people in Toledo, the voters, remembered what it was like to not have water for 3 days. They had done it themselves, even though everyone who is part of the system all along the way told them they couldn't do it. They were told their law was illegal. It was unconstitutional. It would make all businesses close up and leave the city. Like not having any clean water is really great for business. Again, let's remember Flint. So the celebration of Lake Erie Bill of Rights passing went on at a local bar that evening. The very first rights of nature law in the United States recognizing the rights of a specific ecosystem. Huge accomplishment. Yep. The celebration lasted a whole 12 hours. Within 12 hours of passing their law, the residents learned that a huge industrial farm of 7,000 plus acres in another county had sued the city of Toledo to have the Lake Erie Bill of Rights invalidated and overturned. And what's ironic is that while Toledo is getting global recognition for passing this groundbreaking rights of law, and it really, I mean, if you aren't familiar with it, I mean, you can just Google it. The New York Times, CNN, U.S. News and World Report, Mother Jones, the BBC, Le Monde in France are all writing about this phenomenal event that took place, this groundbreaking event in Toledo, Ohio. In fact, several Toledo residents and activists who worked on the Lake Erie Bill of Rights were invited this past Earth Day to the United Nations to speak about the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And at the same time that all that is happening, there is a lawsuit filed by the corporate entities to have that law overturned as soon as possible. So what you have to understand about this lawsuit is that this farm sued the city of Toledo, and that's different than the people. The people wrote and passed this law. The city government was never behind it. They didn't write this law. They didn't pass this law. They actually spoke out against this law. But yet now they're they're having to defend the law. So the people said, well, they're not going to make our arguments. How could they? They don't support this. So what they did is they filed a motion, and this gets into the legal part, but they tried to get into the lawsuit. They said, yes, most people don't want to be on a lawsuit, right? In this case, they tried to are fighting to get in. They said, we want to be in this lawsuit. We want to make our arguments and defend our law. Well, guess what happened? The judge said, no, you can't intervene. Now, to keep the story going and make it more interesting, there's another party that wants to get into the lawsuit that isn't named in the lawsuit, and that's the state of Ohio. They want to get in, but guess what side they want to get in on? The side of the big industrial farm. Against the people. Against the people. And now think about that, really. Here the people pass a law to protect Lake Erie, and the state of Ohio should also be wanting to protect Lake Erie, right? They claim that they are the sole protector of the lake, that they are the only ones with authority to protect the lake. Well, they've had this authority all along, and if you ask me, they're doing a pretty shitty job. They're not protecting it so well. But of course, the court ruled in the state's favor and said, yes, you can be a party to the lawsuit. So again, it just shows how the whole system, we believe we're being protected, that there's justice, things are fair, and you find out every step of the way that it's not set up for us. So now the state of Ohio, I look at them like the wizards in the play here, right? They're in there claiming to be the trustees of the lake. Well, you know what? She's an ecological collapse. Between the phosphorus, it's not just in Toledo, right, and just the big farms in Northwest Ohio. And the manure. We also have open lake dumping of dredged toxic wastes. We have the application of toxic and radioactive brine on our roads, and the possibility of being a guinea pig for industrial wind projects in the lake, because it's never been done in fresh water before. Lake Erie is in real trouble, and this is all with her great protector, the state of Ohio, looking out for her. But let's also remember that the state is also the trustee of the Ohio River, which has been listed as the most polluted river in the United States for over a decade. So I really think they're derelict in their duties, if you ask me. So on Thursday of this past week, just 2 days ago, 3 residents in Toledo filed a pro se lawsuit against the state of Ohio. And what pro se means is that they don't have a lawyer. They went into the courthouse and filed a lawsuit saying, this is our law, it's our water, and we're going to file to keep it and to protect it using our law as our enforcement mechanism. What's interesting is there's an article in the Toledo Blade yesterday, and it quotes our Attorney General Yost, and he says that the lawsuit by the people is junk. He calls it a junk lawsuit. I said, funny that he believes that the people's lawsuit to protect the lake is junk, but the lawsuit brought by a corporate farm is somehow legitimate and okay. So what does this all mean? It does seem as though Libor is going to be overturned, because the system, we all know, is set to have that happen. It's fixed. That's what's supposed to happen. And that's the truth. I'm just being honest with everybody. But the truth has to be very far away. You can't think about that truth. And the people have to remember a message that this is a movement, and a movement for systemic change. That's what Libor is about. It's what the Columbus Community Bill of Rights is all about. It's what community rights is all about. The people have to challenge the system itself, a system that gives corporations more rights than people in nature. The people need to challenge a government that is no longer representing their best interests, but rather the interests of profit and greed. The people need to refuse to obediently follow unjust laws written by corporations for corporate benefit. So if more communities follow the lead of Toledo, of Columbus, of Broadview Heights, Medina, Athens, and Williams County, and just start drafting the just and legitimate laws that will protect people and nature. Even if you're told you can't do that, it's illegal. Do it anyway. Remember, women were told to simply accept not being able to vote, and if they tried, it was illegal. Rosa Parks and those brave men and women who sat at the lunch counter were told, you can't sit there. and they sat there anyway. LGBTQ folks were told they had no rights and couldn't marry, and yet one town at a time changed laws to recognize their rights. You see, once the genie of change has been let out of the bottle, it becomes very difficult to shove it back in, so to speak. Movements are about bringing about cultural change and changing minds when that happens. And when that happens, the laws will follow. It's hard work, of course. It's not like you just snap your fingers or click your red slippers together and it just happens. But if we're going to make the necessary change, it's what has to happen to the system. And in the end, it is well worth the pain that we suffer along the way. Lastly, the only thing else I want to say quickly is that I want you to think, because this coming week is the 4th of July. And it's a holiday, that we celebrate in every community. I want people to think about what they're celebrating as they're watching those fireworks go up in the air and oohing and aahing over them. Think about the colonists. They governed their communities, and they knew what was best for their communities. It was that king across the ocean who didn't like that they were governing their colonies here. The king said, no, I'm going to make the laws, and they're going to benefit me, and they're going to benefit the East India Corporation, my buddy, and my buddies who own that. Well, that's what it was about. So the colonists really, were the radicals of that time. They were very radical, and they said, no, you know what? We've tried to plead with you, we've tried to reason with you, and you've refused. So we were actually, when I watch those fireworks go off, that's what I think of. We're celebrating those radicals who stood up. Just like the radicals here in Columbus, the radicals in Toledo, the radicals all over the state working to challenge the system as it is. Think about it and volunteer to help these, if you're in Columbus, these community activists in Columbus challenging the system that is permitting harm to your drinking water. Think about Dorothy in the play if you have to, realizing no one was going to save her in Time's Out, but that they had to do it themselves. That's what the community rights movement is all about. And even in the face of opposition and naysayers, because you know and believe in your heart that all power is inherent in the people, and that the people do indeed have the right and the duty to alter, reform, and even abolish any government that is no longer protecting their rights, their safety, and their happiness. So thank you very much. We do have, if you want to learn more about the community rights movement, there's some literature in the back. We also I can come out, I'm the state organizer, talk in your community. We have films that we can show. And please, if you're in the Columbus area, the Columbus Community Bill of Rights, they have a booth here. Go over, check them out, sign the petition. They need 10,000 signatures to put their Bill of Rights on the ballot. They collected enough last year, but the system kept them off the ballot. And that means all of you voters, your vote was suppressed because you did not get to cast a vote for that. Just to let you know what else the community rights group is doing here in Ohio, we've also filed a federal civil rights lawsuit, because what we're finding is the people, as they push and challenge against the system for what they believe in, what's right for their communities, and try to pass laws, they're taking that right of initiative away and trying to stifle it. They've done it to communities over and over in the last few years, and so we filed a federal civil rights lawsuit claiming that they're violating our right to free speech, to due process, voter suppression, our right to petition the government for grievances. So, that's another thing. You're not going to find a lot of this in the newspapers either, in public media. And the other way you can help with a movement, because a movement by the people needs the people to tell the stories and spread the message themselves. So please look for these. Go to the Ohio Community Rights Network website. Go to Columbus Community Bill of Rights and share the stories you see there. Share what you've heard today with other people, because that's the only way we're going to make an impact here. Thank you. Thank you all very much.